Welcome to Our Girl Relationships. We talk about the problems people face in their day to day lives. Let's start with the video. My sister in law can be extremely irritating, and I'm the kind of person who'd rather keep her mouth shut than argue with a broken magpie. So, when my sister in law came over to my house with her kid daughter, she let them roam free and do whatever they wanted, and I asked her to make them stop only once, to which she replied that she has a not saying no policy. After hearing such insolent and ridiculous things, I decided there's no point in trying to make her see why at times no is exactly what you need to say, and let her kid create a ruckus. And oh boy, by the time they were leaving, I was within an inch of becoming a violent person. My sister in law had zero basic adequates when it comes to visiting relatives, and she is surely not teaching any to her kid. The only saving point in that kid's life can be her dad. And if even he gives up, then all I can say is that little girl is going to be the bully of her high school in future. The 3 days she was here, she destroyed my home. They had brought along with them her Lego set, and instead of using those set pieces to build something, she was playing hide and seek with them. The amount of times I've almost broken my foot by stepping on them or tripping is giving me nightmares. And that's not all. She asked her mom if she could use the spare bed sheets in the guest room to play pretend being a ghost. And of course, sister in law let her roam around in the house. I was talking to a neighbor at the door when I heard something break and rushed in to see my coffee machine lying on the floor. I didn't have to plug it in to know it wouldn't work. I asked what happened, and sister in law said the sheet was too big, and while her daughter was running around with open arms, she stumbled and accidentally hit the coffee machine. Like, I'm sorry, I didn't get a smaller bed sheet. Was it too much for them to stay in a room with enough space to run around, or not do such stupid shit to begin with? I somehow controlled my anger and smiled through my pain because I knew causing a scene would only result in unnecessary squabble between me and my brother. The next day, I was setting the table for dinner and carrying a pot with soup in it to the table. I specifically told sister in law's daughter to stay in the living room because she was running around and playing, and even my sister in law to watch her until I'm done with the dinner. But of course, once again, they didn't listen, and the daughter ran into me to give me a back hug. Unfortunately, I tripped and the pot slipped from my hands with soup falling all over the rug. If y'all ever had a rug, you know how hard it is to clean food from it. And even though I washed it instantly with soap, there's a big yellow spot visible on it. I couldn't even shout at the kid because she was just playing, and it was sister in law's responsibility to make sure she doesn't run into unsafe places. But I was definitely at my wits' end. And I got the opportunity for revenge when the kids saw a promo video of Impractical Jokers while I was surfing what to watch and asked me what are impractical jokes. I told her they are silly pranks that people do on other people, and she asked me what pranks are. So I explained to her how you make a joke out of people you love or are comfortable with, and it's something that shouldn't bother them. I told her it's only done with people you know wouldn't mind you playing a prank, and even told her a few stories of pranks I've pulled or seen other people do. By the time I was done explaining, she was fascinated and asked me if she could do it too. I saw my opportunity and took it. I used sister in law's not saying no policy and told her yes, of course she can do them. I then told her in detail about what she could do at her home to prank her parents. That was her last day at my place, and the next day they left. Yesterday, 3 weeks later, I opened the door and found my sister in law standing there crying. She was in hysterics, so I invited her in and gave her some water to calm her down. Once she was somewhat quieter, I asked her what happened, and gosh, it was all my fault. Apparently, the kid did pull some pranks and they were not harmless. I only told her about the ones where you write something on someone's back or use ketchup to pretend to be hurt. But she must have talked to other people because sister-in-law told me how she's been pulling pranks every other day and she's up to her limits dealing with them. At first, she changed the sugar with salt, and it was just a silly trick they all laughed at while eating. But then she switched sister in law's face cream with mayo, and it wasn't fun anymore. But even then, it wasn't too bad because no one was harmed. But last week, she changed my brother's prescription pills with the multivitamins, and sister in law took them thinking she was just taking her vitamins. Next thing they knew, she had to go to ER with high fever and lack of breath. It wasn't something life-threatening, but they can't overlook this habit of hers, and my sister-in-law has been trying to tell her it's wrong and she can't keep doing this, but her daughter isn't listening. She has been throwing tantrums and is giving sister-in-law a hard time because she denied her something for the first time in her life. I was feeling guilty for how I taught her about pranks, but at the same time, I think sister in law had it coming because of her ridiculous policy. I managed to calm her down and send her back home, and seeing how she didn't blame me for what's happening in her life, it looks like she doesn't know I taught her kid about pranks. But even if she knew, I don't think I would have apologized because she kind of deserved it. Am I the a-hole for not coming clean and helping her out, or simply for enjoying what's happening? Well, my sister-in-law called today after a week because she found out I was the one who taught that kid about pranks and how to pull them off. To be honest, the ones I taught her weren't even harmful, and even if she had done her worst, they wouldn't hurt a fly. More importantly, I had no idea where she learned about the other ones, so I can't completely say it's my fault. She did what she did. But sister-in-law wasn't thinking the same way I was, which is not really a surprise for me, seeing how she had a not saying no policy for raising kids while I have a policy where I do anything to teach them how to behave. Anyway, she started ripping into me the moment I picked her call and didn't stop until I hung up. She didn't give me a chance to put in a word and kept calling me the B word and other names for messing with her kid and being responsible for her almost death, which again is an overstatement as she told me herself that the doctors categorized her case as an allergic reaction to taking the wrong pills. Anyway, I hung up and turned my phone off so she wouldn't bother me for a while. I need to collect myself and let my anger go before I can talk to her again. I can't really avoid this conversation because if not her, I'd have to face my brother, which would be worse. It's been a while since I updated, and that's because the last time I tried talking to my sister-in-law, she absolutely refused to listen to a word of reason I said and kept on asking me to apologize to her. But I was adamant about not saying sorry. It was her upbringing from the start that the kid didn't know what's right or wrong. Because of her ideals and policies, they destroyed my house, and all I did in return was teach the kid what pranks are. And it's not like she wouldn't have found out about them a few years into the future. I do feel bad for what happened and how my sister-in-law had to be rushed to the ER, but I still wouldn't take the full blame for it. I still believe she had it coming and needed to learn how to say no to her kid. So, my sister-in-law told my brother about everything that happened, and he called me to ask me to apologize to his wife, but I was already so mad with my sister-in-law that hearing my brother ask me to say sorry for something that may or may not have been entirely my fault, I lost it. I told him how he needs to look at his own family and kid before asking me to apologize. I told him how that little devil destroyed my house because his wife refused to control her kid, and I deserve an apology too. I still have the stain in my rug which refuses to come out, and I'm pretty sure I'll end up throwing it away. Well, my brother is just as hot-blooded as me, so we ended up arguing, and now none of us are talking. I met my brother today at my parents' house after 7 months of no contact. It was for Thanksgiving, and we were all invited. Our parents didn't know about us fighting, and a Thanksgiving dinner at our parents' house is uncommon, so I didn't think they'd invite my brother too. But they did, and I only found out when I met them there. I guess it was a good thing that we had months of space because we were all calm and collected now and were able to maintain some kind of peace. Because of our parents forcing us together, we did end up talking to each other, and by the end of the night, both my brother and I apologized to each other for our behavior. But his wife is still mad at me, and I told my brother in clear terms how I wouldn't apologize because it's not my fault what the kid did. And he said that he understands the blame lies with all of us. He also told me how lately he's taking a bigger part in his daughter's upbringing and has even succeeded in making her understand how she can't get everything she wants. He told me I should come by the house sometime and see for myself the change, but I think I'm going to pass on it. I doubt very much that my sister in law would like me there. NTA, not the a hole. Your sister in law's policy is stupid. And what you told the kid is something that she would have found out about eventually. NTA, it's not your job to teach the kid what is good or bad. It's the parent's job. And sister in law is an a hole for not saying no to the kid. The only thing that little girl is learning is how to be a bully, and Princess is going to have a hard time adjusting to this world. My housemate, John, 22, male, and I, 24, female, met online last year when we were both looking for an apartment. At first, things were great. Our lifestyles are compatible and we became friends. But then, John became very controlling. For example, he got annoyed with the phone case I used because it wasn't good enough. He bothered me to change it for months until I gave in because he bought me a new one that he liked more. He also would be annoyed if I didn't follow his advice, even if I hadn't asked for it in the first place. This behavior worsened until a pattern emerged. John would lose his temper over something minor and yell at me. Then he would cry and apologize. Then months would go by and it would repeat. I'm so anxious because I'm always walking on eggshells around him. The smallest things make him upset, like opening my bedroom window while he cooked something in the kitchen. John took this as an insult to his cooking somehow. This all became too much for me, and I told John that I'm moving out. My name isn't on the lease, only John's, so I can leave without consequence. He begged me to reconsider and said that he cannot pay rent on his own. He cried and said that he felt like I didn't value our friendship, and that was why he was so unstable recently. Reluctantly, I agreed to stay for a few more months, but nothing changed. Last week, I approached John again and explained that I am so uncomfortable living here that it is affecting my mental health and making me depressed. I am anxious always now. John got very upset and accused me of ruining things by being depressed and called me stupid for not seeking help for some personal problems I confided in him a long time ago. I finally had enough and told him that I am moving out and I no longer care about his ability to pay the rent on his own, and I also no longer want his friendship. I left the house to calm down. When I came back, John was gone. He had left the door unlocked, so I locked it and went to sleep. Well, I woke up later that night to John loudly pounding on the sliding glass patio door next to my bedroom and shouting about me locking him out on purpose. He had climbed the patio, about 20 feet off the ground, in a rage. Apparently, he hadn't taken his house key when he left earlier, and he was convinced that I locked him out on purpose to mess with him. Instead of calling my phone or ringing our loud doorbell, he decided to climb the patio and bang on the glass door to wake me up. That incident upset me, and I moved out the next morning. Now, John is texting me a lot to move back in for one more month while he finds another housemate. I feel bad for him that he cannot pay the rent on his own and will likely be in trouble with the landlord as a result. But I never want to speak to him again, never mind live with him. AITA for moving out and leaving an ex-friend in a bad financial situation? Thanks. NTA, I don't care what John's deal or diagnosis is. The fact he climbed 20 feet off the ground to get to you from the patio instead of calling or ringing the doorbell is absolutely wild. Do not go back. Do not continue speaking to John. Keep your new location whereabouts private. Oh, and change your phone case back to whatever you had before. NTA, John sounds completely unhinged and clearly has some issues he needs to work through. You're lucky that you're not on the lease, but on his end, if he couldn't afford it on his own, he should have insisted that you signed it too. This part is kind of his fault. You've done the right thing by leaving that awful environment. Pass go, collect $200, never look back. John was never your friend. He's just a thankfully now ex housemate you met online who developed some weird, misplaced obsession with you. For context, I'm currently 16, female. Dad moved to a different city for work when I was 7. At the time, I was living in my paternal grandmother's house with her, my mother, who worked, and a full-time maid for me because my grandmother was clear about not wanting to attend to a kid all the time. Between the ages of 7 to 9, my grandmother would regularly abuse me verbally for being a girl. She had wanted a grandson. Told me she hated my existence, that she wanted me to die, etc., etc. I confided in my mother, who confronted my grandmother, who denied it, and so it continued for 2 years. When I was 9, Mom and I shifted to the city Dad was living in, and my grandmother continued to live in our hometown. Not bringing her along was also my mom's way of removing me from that situation. I wasn't close to my dad to begin with, so I told him once, very briefly, about the things my grandmother had said, and he straight up called me a liar and refused to hear more about it. Years passed. I maintained my distance from my grandmother when she visited and rarely interacted with her. As my confidence grew, I was upfront with her about why I didn't want to be close to her whenever she'd complain about me not calling her or whatever. I've never grown to see my dad as a confidant, and we share a somewhat awkward relationship. This year, she was diagnosed with cancer, but my dad decided not to disclose the diagnosis to her or treat her since nothing could be done. He had her put on sedatives to the point where she was in a vegetative state, and she died a month later. At her funeral, I actively tried to think of any good memory I shared with her, but I drew a complete blank. So I was very visibly not crying. My dad, on the other hand, was bawling into the shoulders of colleagues he'd invited. It's been 3 months since then. He's been telling everyone about what a warrior she was, right to the end, and a bunch of crap that isn't remotely true since she was never a brave woman, and she died not even knowing what she was in hospital for, because she just blindly trusted my dad to save her. I've been saying nothing out of respect since he lost his mother, but the constant lying and tears that appear only when there's an audience present had been getting on my nerves. A few days ago, he randomly blew up at me for not crying at her funeral and went on about what people must have thought. It's safe to say I lost it at that point. We had a long, loud screaming match in which I told him how the things she'd done had impacted me and my self-confidence, how he hadn't done shit to protect me, and how he was lying about her to everyone so blatantly now. He very mockingly apologized for her behavior, and we haven't spoken since. Mom is of the opinion that I did the right thing by being honest, but I probably could have chosen a better time. AITA? NTA. It's amazing how people are allowed to act like a-holes, but when they get taken on, it's no longer a fair playing field. Your father never protected you from your grandmother and expected you to cry crocodile tears at her funeral? Hell, he was crying crocodile tears. You were well within your right to blow up at him. Hopefully, he thinks long and hard about this and either apologizes or does not bring this up again. NTA, she was abusive to you and you have every right to tell your story. You don't owe her or your dad silence on the subject. Your dad is more concerned about other people's opinions than about you, and that's really messed up. At your age, you probably don't have a lot of options to distance yourself from him yet, but I would be keeping your emotional distance as much as possible. This is trademark behavior from an abusive person. It's very likely that once you move out, you'll start to notice other patterns and realize he carried on her legacy with a different facade. At the very least, he is emotionally neglectful, and that leaves deep wounds. I hope you're okay. You are absolutely NTA here, and I'm honestly really impressed at the way you handled this, especially at your age. You're going to be fine. NTA. If he's only crying when in front of people and making a big show of it, then he probably didn't care as much as he wants everybody to think. Also, getting mad at you for not crying at the funeral of someone who told you they wanted you dead? That's some clown ass behavior right there. Dad sounds like he needs therapy and to step up as an actual dad for once.